Good afternoon and welcome to the September Design Review Committee meeting. The Design Review Committee is the subcommittee of the Historic Zoning Commission. The meeting's informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or COA for projects within the city historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on the discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice, but the DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, which is the Historic Zoning Commission. There are 5 items on this afternoon's agenda. When your item is called, please introduce yourself and generally describe your item in about 5 minutes. Please focus on the specific points of your project that you want DRC to discuss. Our first item today is discussions of alterations, rooftop windscreen and shade structure at 231 Public Square. Lines Incorporated is the applicant, and this item was deferred from September Historic Zoning Commission. You're on.
And I did want to mention to everyone, all the applicants, you're welcome to come at the table here. And when you speak in the microphone, please push the button on the microphone to make sure the green light comes on so that we can all hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Good
Welcome.
afternoon. Trent Sullivan, Lines Inc. You're correct. We were here last Monday evening really late, and we were deferred here. So I think that was a good decision. And really specifically want to talk about the roof deck on the building adjacent to us here. We've got finally have a tenant to occupy that space up there, and we have applications in for permit for the build out of their space. And as we begin to think about habitating the remaining of the space, which is actually the roof deck, there are some things that that tenant would like to do to make it more habitable. We've put together some exhibits that were presented previously. Those modifications would include some way to get somebody out of direct sunlight, or on a day like today, be actually able to use the space up there in mild weather. And the 2 things that they would like to do are include some sort of windscreen on 3 sides, and then on the far right side there in the plan, some sort of shading device to be constructed there. So we're here today to get your feedback and opinions on those things, and then be able to put something together to present hopefully next month. We've done some research in trying to understand exactly what our limitations are. I mean, there's a section on roof deck, actually on roofs in the guidelines under non-residential, and something else to be considered is the guidelines for a deck. Since we were here last week, my client feels like they could legally build a deck in place of that shade structure. So anyway, that's really what I've got to speak about today. The windscreen that was proposed was, they were suggesting glass. In the proposal that we talked about last week, it was 6+ feet. I think they've come back and thought, since the parapet wall itself is 3+ feet, if they had another 3 foot of glass above that would help to do what they wanted to do there. So that's it.
Amanda?
Thank you all very much. I did want to remind the Historic Zoning Commission of the staff analysis and recommendation for this item that was presented last week. Essentially, the guidelines that would apply would be for roofs and for the addition of modern features where they would need to be placed where there's no visibility from street view. We do have a section on decks in the non-residential section of the guidelines. If I recall correctly, that section is really specific to building out a structural deck on the rear of a building. I don't recall any sort of instance where it talks about a rooftop deck, but rooftop decks are permissible. It's just the design guidelines in a historic district would recommend that those alterations to allow for those features would not have visibility from street views. This building was approved by the city, and part of that process was through the Historic Zoning Commission. It has very high visibility on probably the most major, intersection in the city, which is our public square. We wanted to make sure that in being respectful to the historic buildings around it, that we honored the zoning ordinance and the design guidelines by having a 3-story structure with the 4th recessed. That does create a rooftop deck area that's already inherently there. And we certainly understand the desire of the applicant or the client that the applicant is supporting in utilizing that area. It's a lovely view, and it is certainly something that is special about that building. All that said, the reason that the 4th story is recessed on that building is so that it reads as a 3-story structure. Adding a shade structure that's framed in the manner that you see here, especially if it's black, will call attention to it in a way that's not intended by the original approval of the building and is not in keeping with the intent of the design guidelines. I would like more information on the windscreens, but it's my understanding that this would be a 6-foot tall panels on top of the existing 4-foot parapet walls. I don't feel confident that that would not be visible due to potential glare and reflectivity. So I think more information from the applicants required to even be able to fully understand the intent of that request, whether it's some 3D modeling, other examples that you would see that are on buildings where you're looking at them from down at a street view looking up, I think would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, questions from the commission?
I do have a question as to the perceived need for a windscreen. What would it actually accomplish on that building?
Well, I mean, it's natural uplift. It would just provide, like you would put a deck, a wall, a screen wall around your property, just to allow keep the wind from blowing up there.
And what is the height of that parapet again?
It's just below 4 foot, and so we would be looking to add another 3 to 4 foot of screen wall.
And if you didn't do glass, what other type of material would you use?
I think the only other thing we could use there would be planted material.
Subplanted?
Planted
planted
material.
material.
Plants material, right?
And just to clarify, the application that was before the Historic Zoning Commission asked for 72-inch walls, excuse me, which would be 5 feet. And Trent had acknowledged that they could go down to, 4 feet? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct,
I didn't want there to be confusion about that height.
Well, it was originally 6 feet was what we talked about last week, and now
Oh,
we're
yeah,
saying
72
3
inches
feet
is
or-
6 feet.
6
yes.
feet, and now we're down to
It's me trying to do
3
quick math.
on
Correct.
top of the 4-foot parapet.
Yes, sir. Correct.
So instead of 10, we're down to 7, really.
Right.
From the floor.
Yeah.
That's where we are. Mary, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
We pushed it back so there wouldn't be visibility. And so now we're actually, in my mind, asking to increase that 4th floor in a way, because anything you do is going to be visible.
Yeah.
And it will also be very, I think, contemporary looking, which is not, which doesn't seem like it's in keeping with the square in general, nor with the building. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the Harpeth
Yes.
Hotel, or that top floor, I don't know if we can use that as a comparison.
I think you can, and actually, one of the residents have put trees out there, but they've put like, I think 3. But you see, I mean, you clearly see them from
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other
all
thing,
vantage.
Yeah.
and then just as a final comment, the other concern, of course, is that we would be setting a precedent, and so we have to consider that this kind of proposal would be asked or requested for other buildings in the public square, which we think would be, or I shouldn't speak for anyone else, I think would be inconsistent with the historical context of the square.
All right. Any other comments? Brian, you got anything? Susan?
Ms. Worthington?
Oh, sorry. Can't see that far.
What is the use of this space? Is it restaurant?
No, it's a private office, and they're going to use that space to entertain their clients.
Well, is it possible that there are less visible sides of that upstairs? So is it possible for it to be contained to someplace that's not as visible? And I think what would be helpful to me is see some kind of creative example that somebody's done somewhere, because I just have never seen it done any way that it just didn't look like a party going on top of a building, and that's not been the character of our commercial downtown district.
I do.
Josh?
Is there anything preventing I know that this windscreen's requested, but there's nothing preventing the use. I mean, the parapet wall is high enough where it can be used currently, right?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
It's
If
just-
you sat down, you would well, if you're my height, for sure. If you sat down, you would pretty much be protected, I think, with just,
Amanda, put this picture up from there.
But it meets code
Yeah,
guidelines
it
for,
meets-
you know,
So-
no
so
one
Right.
leaning over and
Right.
falling over.
Nobody's
That's what I
gonna-
thought. That's what I
Josh, there it is.
Yeah. No, I assumed that was the case. I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
I was right on that you could presently use it today.
I simply can't support anything stuck on top of the parapet walls. There was so much effort put in by a lot of people toward when this building was redone, and it's tremendous, the way it looks now. And I just think visually it would be very unattractive to have, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, whatever amount of windscreen you want to create up there. I think based on what you said, the use would be if you put some plantings on the floor outside, as the example Mary gave at Harpeth Square, that might be a solution. But I can't support anything put on top of the parapet.
One other comment too, back to the use of this for entertainment purposes, and was the windscreen also an option to prevent overspill noise from whatever entertaining was going on up there?
You know, that certainly would help mitigate sound, but that certainly wasn't their consideration.
Okay. Just trying to figure out the use on it, because it could be a 24/7 situation.
Well, as a reminder, we don't review use, but we do review visibility and alterations to the context.
That
Thank
question was proposed to us at the meeting earlier, last Monday night, that, what is visible? Well, you could see that sitting down in your car, standing, walking around. It would be very visible in the community. And I must agree with Chairman Roberts, I couldn't support that.
That is one of my greatest questions as we come back to present. What is line of sight? The guidelines, I don't think are super clear, in defining that. The only thing I could look at was more Franklin zoning, what they would ask for a zoning review of line of sight. If I could get some guidance on that, that would help certainly in the exhibit.
I think I said this Monday. All I know is if you're driving up on Main Street late in the afternoon and the sun is setting in the west, the glare coming off a glass windscreen is going to blind you, just about. You driving up Main Street, it will hit you right in the eye. So I mean, that would be I don't know where that might be written, but that's, from a practical standpoint, from experience, logically, that would tell me that would be a real problem.
I can offer a suggestion. This isn't exactly a parallel situation, but because there is a windscreen proposed as well as a shade that could be over the top, it almost appears to be sort of a non-heated, cooled addition. Rooftop additions are not generally recommended by our guidelines, but when they are to be considered, and when I say rooftop addition, it would be like a framed or bricked in, like enclosed addition. They're recommended to be non-visible from vantage points within a block radius of the building on all sides. So this is, unfortunately for the applicant, it's just such a high visible elevation because it is very visible from 3 elevations in particular, and then the elevation from on the side from City Hall, maybe not as much, but it does offer visibility going down 3rd.
Well, that, I always feel like it all depends, and we put the elevator tower on what we thought was the least visible
Yes, good point. That's exactly-
facade
you're
of the
right,
building.
Exactly right.
So, using just that if a building's up closer to it, it's not going to be as visible. And is there a way to come back with something that might meet some of what you want to do, but be in the most invisible part, which would not be, in my mind, the front or the side of the building? And then on the Second Avenue, I think it is that the wisdom that I felt like we used on the elevator.
So to get everyone's bearings, this side faces Public Square, this side faces East Main, and this side faces the parking lot that is between this building and Second Avenue. So I think Ms. Pierce's comment would be, looking to an area over here to maybe achieve the same end as opposed to the very highly visible front facade facing the Public Square.
And I do think the shade that was offered,
Shade structure?
yes, it's just,
This,
it just
pull that up a
needs
minute.
to be rethought. I mean, it looks heavy, it
Yeah.
looks awkward. If you did something like that, you would want it to land very soft.
What about if it was retractable?
I wanted to bring
Yes.
that up, and I failed to do that during my comments, so thank you for bringing that up, Mary. The previous owner of the building did ask for approval at one point in time for retractable awnings, which were approved. That approval has expired, but it is something where I am happy to share that information with Mr. Sullivan. What it was is, as the person who helped design and own this building, he cared very much so about making sure that every detail was the way that he had envisioned it. And he felt, and the commission at the time agreed, that a retractable awning, while it would be visible for the time that it's out, would be the most sensitive in that it is flat. So it's not offering a vertical element that draws your eye.
Right,
Yeah.
it's not doing what this appears to do.
That is.
Understood.
Yes, and I would say, having been the lucky person, a friend of mine did have a rooftop garden, porch kind of thing, downtown, that I got to go to a lot. And if it was a day that you wanted to be outside, there was no cover, there was no windshield. It was Fred Reynolds' house on Margin, and you were completely comfortable. If you had wanted to be, if it was a day you wanted to be outside, you were comfortable. If it's raining and blowing, there is probably nothing going to make that where you're just anxious to be out there. But I got to be there I would say probably once a month, so I was there a lot when they lived there. And it's kind of that thing, like you don't want to be in a park if it's blowing and, 90-something degrees or pouring rain. And I think that's going to be for this space, just from a common sense point of view.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Amanda, you want to wrap up anything? Okay. I
Mr.
think
Chair,
we-
Mr. Chair,
yeah, I'm sorry.
I would just mirror Mary's comments. I honestly don't feel like I can support this application.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
I don't feel like I can support this application. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And then Amanda, can I follow up with you on the return?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is discussion of alterations driveway and fencing at 810 West Main Street. Ben McCreary, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Yes, Ben
You look a little
McCreary.
different than that other McCreary.
Right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
usually send her, but you got the short end of the stick tonight. But yeah, so we're talking about a project at 810 West Main. And really, we're focusing on the backyard in this project. And what the owner wants to do is there's already a side access from, Amanda, I'm sorry, I don't know the side street. Do you have Google Maps that you could pull up, perhaps? or-
It is 9th Avenue,
Ninth, that
I
sounds right.
believe.
Yeah, so
It's
it's
where-
9th Avenue.
The Powell residence is at the intersection, and this house is to the left of it, facing West Main.
Yes, so the West Main and then the cross street that the access is on, it's really one block
What
back.
kind of an alley street?
It's an alley street, yeah. From 8, thank you, Kelly.
I'll just pull up Street View so that everyone can get their bearings. Give me just a second.
So it's kind of a unique condition, right? You're entering back kind of almost behind another property to get into the back of a property that's mid-block.
So before I jump down to Street View, it's 8th Avenue, excuse me, I was thinking 9th right here. So 8th Avenue, there's 808. You can see it on the screen here. It's a non-contributing structure as a 2-story porch added to the front. And then this tutor is to the left of it, facing West Main. If you're on 8th, the way to access this property is through this easement that runs behind it. Here's Fair Street. So now I'm going to go to the property and show you. Now, this looks a little different now. There was an addition approved to this recently. So there is an easement that runs through here that gets to the garage for the property on the screen right here. So it runs through 808 and accesses 810.
Yep. So what we are proposing and are asking the commission to consider is what we'd like to do is really just make that look nicer than what it does right now. It's kind of an afterthought. It looks like it's a forgotten little driveway. It's a mixture of pea gravel and limestone gravel and things like that. So what we'd like to do is turn that into some sort of like a Hollywood driveway or the strip driveway that will run from 8th Avenue to the property in question. So you can see up there at the top of the screen. And then we just want to add a parking pad back there where that is. But also allow the owner to close that off so that their backyard is private for their use. So that's where the sliding gate or sliding fence comes in that you can kind of see below that. So it would be, there's an existing fence line separating this property from the adjacent property that's 8 feet tall. And you can kind of see in that bottom right picture, it's an existing fence. So what we're proposing is basically just mimicking the rhythm and materials in that fence, but creating a sliding element that can slide across and close off the backyard. So it looks like an enclosed backyard with the fence when the owners are there, and then when they leave and come and go, that it could be slid open just for that type of thing. Right now, there's nothing there, so you can see straight in from 8th Avenue all the time. Also along that road, the adjacent property owner is improving their property as well. And so there will be some improvements to the fence. Right now, there is no fence that's along the easement of the property adjacent to it, but the part of this process is that there would eventually be more of a fence there, so it kind of be a continuous fence wall into where that will be.
Okay, so the alley goes straight in from Eighth or
From
Ninth,
Eighth.
whatever that is.
Right.
And
It
then
does.
you turn left into their,
You basically just drive straight into their
oh, you drive
garage.
straight, okay. So
So
that
you-
garage, you go
That
straight
is
into
their,
that garage.
that's the little garage you can see in the back of their
Okay,
property.
I'm
Yeah.
with you now.
So you just go straight into that. What we would be doing is
Wow.
kind of putting a little fence. You can see the fence
Yeah,
right there, and we would
I see
just
it.
put an extension of that, so it would just slide across, close off the end of the easement.
okay.
The property owners here have not indicated a desire for a fence here, but it's certainly something that, you know, we're happy to look at if that application comes forward.
And really, I brought that up just as a thought of what potentially is going to happen, but you're right, that hasn't been solidified yet. But regardless, it's not really the purview, I guess, of this submission that we're talking about right now.
Okay. Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is something I did ask Mr. McCreary to come forward to the commission to consider because it is a bit unique from the typical administrative review application. Also, in that the guidelines are, you know, commenting specifically on gates being swinging gates and not sliding gates. The applicant's proposing to utilize a sliding gate, I believe, just because of necessity that they're not able to swing back and forth and have the clearance to do so. Their intent is to design so that it appears when it's closed to look like a paneled, you know, vertical board privacy fence as is currently there. The considerations that staff had were, you know, where would the location correspond with the property line? You know, the fence and any improvements to the fence would need to fall on this property and not this property. With the proposal being 8 foot tall, our zoning ordinance does recommend, I believe, the maximum is 7, but it does tend to correspond with the guidelines recommend a maximum of 7, I believe, but the zoning ordinance will allow up to 8 with a building permit. And Kelly's going to check that for me really quickly. But if it's the commission's decision that having a fence that's the same height as the gate, the same height as the existing fence, I believe that could be appropriate if it meets our code requirements. The other consideration I wanted to bring forward was the driveway. Right now, the driveway is more gravel, pea gravel, I believe. And the use of a Hollywood-style drive, which, just to clarify for everyone, it's more of a strip driveway where you have 2 strips here with the grass in the middle. That is supported by our design guidelines. I will offer that the owner of the property would need to provide an affidavit that would authorize that action to take place.
The
Because
owner of the adjoining property?
Yes,
Okay.
because this
Easement.
does not
The Powells.
belong to, yes.
Powell's, okay.
This easement does not belong to the property owner that our applicant is representing. Kelly, can you clarify?
I can. 8 feet is allowed for non-residential and mixed uses, but for residential uses, side and rear yard fences are limited to 7 feet.
Thank you. I was thinking the OR and got a little confused. So the fence could go up with the gate rather at 7 feet. The existing conditions are 8. So you could approve a gate that's a little shorter than the current fence, or the current fence could be removed and replaced at a 7-foot height. But the design of the gate is appropriate, and I believe the intent of the design guidelines would be to not adversely impact areas where there's right-of-way. Having a gate swing in and out into the right-of-way is not appropriate, but swinging is appropriate as that's more historically characteristic. Because of the view of this not really being affected in any way, not being on a prominent front or side yard elevation at an intersection, I believe that the intention for the sliding gate and the design of the sliding gate would be appropriate here. Thank you.
Okay, questions from commissioners, anybody?
So if I understand, so if the Powells did put the fence up, so basically you drive by, it looks kind of like a tunnel that you go down, and then you dead end into a where the gate is, so that's the fence, you don't see the garage. And when the owner comes and goes, that would slide and they could go in. I could see how they would, how someone would really want that. It's because it's in the rear of the property, it's not highly visible from any vantage points. You know, I could support that.
What about the 8-foot height?
That's a zoning issue, and I would say at the height that is appropriate by zoning, which is 7.
Okay.
And if I can just clarify, there's no issue with we don't have a right to say whether or not they can put a gate there. It's just a matter of what type of gate, correct?
Yes, the Historic Zoning Commission has granted staff the ability to approve rear yard fencing and gating on behalf of the commission. The reason we wanted this to go forward was the mechanism by which the gate is proposed is contrary to the guidelines.
Sure.
But I believe the location here provides some rationale to
Right.
allow that move forward.
All right, go back to the zoning question, Kelly. Say that again.
7 feet is the maximum height for fencing in residential areas.
Even though the rest of that fence is 8 feet? Is that what I,
Well, I think it's been there a long time, Jim.
okay, all right, I'm just,
So what that would mean is that the applicant, upon approval, could move forward installing a 7-foot tall fence or gate on an 8-foot tall fence. Or they could remove the fence in entirety and then build to meet the current code, which is 7 feet.
okay.
And again, all that's before us is really whether or not we have a swinging gate or a
Yes.
sliding
Yeah,
gate.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like,
And
okay.
it sits so far back
Yes,
that I don't think you're going to be able to tell
No.
what it is.
That's right.
It's a little tight situation,
Yeah.
so I would support it.
yeah, I have no problem with the sliding gate. Makes perfect sense.
Okay, great. Thank
Or the
you.
driveway, if they want to do that. Anybody else?
I
Susan?
support this application.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess
Just a reminder, this does affect 2 properties, and so technically I do need an affidavit for both property owners.
Understood.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let's see, where's my direction? I've lost my script.
And if I could, just to staff's point on that the effect is the sliding versus swinging gate nature wouldn't require an affidavit, right? That would only be on the driveway portion, correct?
We do require affidavits for all applications that are processed by our department. It's just that Mr. McCray is not only representing his client at 810, he's also asking for an alteration on 808 for the driveway.
For the driveway, but not the gate
Yes, but not the
portion.
gate.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, we're ready for the next one, new construction at 179 Splendor Ridge. Chad Gore. Good afternoon.
I bring to you today the 12th edition of Splendor Ridge Single Family. This is lot 14. We talked about lot 13 just last week, so we're one lot over from that. This will be a very familiar situation. The footprint's really similar to many others. The first and second floor, as a matter of fact, have a cousin down the street on lot 7. It's the same first and second floor as lot 7, and so the massing is similar as well. My main goal in developing this house is to make sure it doesn't look too much like lot 7. So what we have is an all brick house. Well, the front massing of it is all brick. Do you want me to go over the site plan first, Amanda, while you have it up there? Yeah, it's like I said, this is real familiar. It's at 39.5% coverage. Garage set as far back as possible with this footprint, as has been done on, I want to say, 8, 9 other ones. The FFE is getting a little closer and closer to the curb, so we don't have to jack it up quite as high out, above the street as some of the ones in the middle. But we'll still have steps near the front sidewalk and then a few more that up to the front porch. So we have an all brick, or excuse me, all brick on the main mass. Then transition to siding as we get to the back 2/3, sort of tell the story of an imaginary addition. This, style-wise, I think is pretty eclectic. It's, these houses are, they all kind of, there's not a whole lot of symmetry here, so they all kind of have a Victorian era massing, but this one's, I know, stylistically detailed more like Italian Renaissance maybe, but not I wouldn't call it a textbook example of anything necessarily. There are some, oh yeah, okay, I'll point out one difference here. You may remember on Lot 7, we had kind of a, what looked like a enclosed porch on the front. This one, we'll look more just like a room, you know, rather than a once was a porch enclosed kind of thing. That'll help differentiate a good bit, I think. Gosh, it looks much more narrow from that angle, doesn't it? Yeah, just the way the massing steps back creates an interesting angle there. Shutters here, you can see contextually we have a good variety of massing with 13 next door and 12 and 11 on down the street. We don't have anything specific planned for lot 15 yet, though we will in about a month. Oh, one important thing I'll be asking for your approval on a painted brick on this house. Mary asked me just last week, when are we going to get some variety in the color? And I 100% agree that we need to sort of mix up the palette a little bit. And one way to do that will be the painted brick. So I'll bring a specific color to the commission meeting and be asking your approval on a painted brick on this house.
When we were here till the midnight hour the other night on the way out, I, drive by there every once in a while just to see what we're approving. And the brick colors, it's monotonous right now to me. So I would love for staff, when they're looking at colors, it's typical in Franklin to have a variety of brick colors and not hit one range. And so I'm delighted this is going to be different.
We happen to have the ones that the brick is on now, happen to be, it was past that point in design that we started introducing some more that had siding or, more siding rather than just brick and one that's going to have some stone on it. So I think there is some variety already being introduced, and of course we want to continue that
And
as
some
well.
variety of brick I would support.
I'd say that's all I need to crow about.
Amanda, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you. I want to start by addressing Ms. Pierce's point. I have asked Mr. Gore to acknowledge when a building's intended to be painted, because that is a color that's almost inherent to the brick, in a sense that, when we review buildings that are masonry, the intention is that the brick be the natural brick color. So staff will not be reviewing the color. That is something I'll be asking Mr. Gore to provide as part of his application for your submittal. The previous approval that came before the commission for a painted brick building was Dorian Gray. I remember that very clearly. So he could bring that forward just to show you the difference between whatever's proposed for this building and that one as well. And I want to remind you that this isn't a historic building, that it doesn't exist. So it's part of the review to understand, because the guidelines are very specific in saying masonry needs to be color of what you see surrounding. So if something's contrary to that, that's something that needs to be brought forward at that time. So thank you for bringing that forward, Chad, and that'll be part of your application. Any questions on that? Okay, so
But Amanda, there's no reason that we can't vary the brick colors more, is there?
No, it's just
Okay.
that it's really
Okay.
not, it's really part of the overall application, because our guidelines say that brick needs to be the color of what's around, but if it's the commission's consideration to do something different, that's really within the commission's purview, not staff.
Okay.
So normally what happens is if the applicant is approved for a new build, I review a number of things on behalf of the commission as the certificate of appropriateness outlines. I review the window specifications. I will sometimes review elements of the building that the commission decides would need to go back to staff, material-wise. Also will review the brick color, and that's to ensure that it's not, you know, sometimes people have different ideas of what the design guidelines are intended to mean. I'm looking for more of a reddish or brownish reddish tone that's more prominent historically, not more orange, not more purple, not more white.
Yeah, and they're not offensive brick colors, it's just not a lot of
Right.
variation.
And this is a unique situation in that it's a full development being proposed, and Mr. Gore is bringing forward 19 different homes, and so it could be very repetitive to have
Yeah.
the same color everywhere. I certainly respect that. But that is something that, you know, staff is really strongly suggesting comes to the commission.
But the houses look like we've seen them in the pictures. I mean, I think they're looking great.
Can I ask a question, Amanda?
Sure.
Is it your suggestion then that we ought to bring, and this would be on future submittals, not necessarily this one, but others that will be unpainted brick, if I can discuss with you ahead of time that it might be something that you feel needs to be sent to the commission in terms of an unpainted brick selection?
Sure. Everything you've given to me, with the exception of one, which I kind of nixed and asked to go to the commission, in terms of the color of the inherent brick, has been fine.
Well,
But if there's something different, like a white brick you wanted to bring forward, that's
Yeah.
certainly something I'd bring forward with the application.
It will be a time-sensitive kind of thing based on how often the commission meets and when we get, when I can get these things in front of our design team too, so.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not saying for staff not to approve the brick color.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm not saying that.
No, I can approve it just within, you know, the way that the guidelines read. So
You're
to
just
get,
wanting to see some variation, I think, Mary, is what,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
the gist of this.
And I would just say we have the same goal,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to
Yeah.
try that,
And
to try
I
to
think-
introduce some.
And the painted brick one's gonna help with that.
absolutely. So to speak to the elevations, the applicant always does a wonderful job with renderings and giving you a more clear, real-world example. I will piggyback off Ms. Pierce's comment. I feel like everything that we've seen and approved is actually what we envisioned being built. There are no surprises out there, so thank you for that. I have no comments on the front elevation. Wait, I zoomed in. This is the right side elevation. This is a stairwell window, I believe, and I have no issues with that, but I did want to point that out to you. I am not necessarily someone that thinks symmetry is entirely appropriate in every circumstance, especially since this isn't stylistically pure to one architectural style. I did want to note this is not centered under here in case that's something someone wanted to bring forward. It's not something staff feels strongly about because it does have regular rhythm and spacing. One elevation, though, I do want to comment on is the left elevation. I understand what is going on here, but I feel that this offers a bit of irregularity in rhythm and spacing. Perhaps if these double windows were pulled more centered, it wouldn't feel so awkward in where the header aligns with the adjacent window here. Another unique element of this building is that these are single windows with the shutters on one side because they would like to do shutters, and they're doing that because they won't fit over here, and that makes sense. So
I'd be okay deleting the shutters if that's a preference of the commissioners as well. I just think it's nice to have, when we have windows in that main mass that can support a shutter, that'd be good to have them there.
I think if the intent is to be more stylistically Italianate, I could definitely support shutters, but because this isn't, you know, when I say pure, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it's eclectic stylistically, so I don't particularly have any preference. I just did want to point that out because that would be something that would be a little different than the norm. I also wanted to know a little bit more, and I may have been able to see it on the site plan, but just don't recall. If you could elaborate on how much further back this wall is from this wall, so that I can get a sense for the chimneys.
Those chimneys are in the same plane. So that the rearmost chimney is on the rear porch.
Okay,
So it's kind of floating out there on the porch.
I see. Okay, that's why I
The
was.
wall that the door beyond is on is 18 feet deeper.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I'm going to ask you about the double window on that elevation, if that's okay. The one
Sure.
you were commenting on.
I thought I had another comment, but
sorry.
I can't think of any. I can't think of it. I might be making that up. Oops. Okay, I'll go back to the other elevation. Oh, wait. I was zoomed in. Okay.
I mean, I realize this is up to me, right? But I'm a little bit trapped with that window. Do you think it would, in terms of moving it left and right, do you think it would help to add a transom above that window that aligned with the windows there closest to it?
I do think it might. I'd like to hear the commission members' comments on that, though.
Chad, a question I've got on that, does it have to be a double window?
Well, on a previous house, we had a single window there, and when we walked through there, that room felt really dark, and we came back to Amanda with that one and changed it to a double window. So it's been one that we've showed in that location as a double window since then when we've done this first floor. And it's turning out really nice. So I guess the answer is it doesn't have to be a double window, but I sure do prefer it as a double window in terms of the quality of the interior space.
Would it be possible to
be a
move this
triple
window over
window?
here, or to even balance it out as a triple? Yes.
Maybe. Again, I'm kind of trapped. I mean, it's about interior layout, which I know is not really, doesn't have to be, is generally, that's up to me, right? Make it work, but it would be pretty tricky.
Amanda, show where you were talking about the transom. Move your little hand over it.
So Mr. Gore had asked if adding a transom over this location, so the top of the transom aligned with the header of this window would help with the rhythm and spacing. It may to some degree. I'm having a harder time visualizing that.
Yeah.
The issue for me is more the rhythm and spacing. So it's not that this window's here necessarily. To Ms. Pierce's point, she's trying to balance it out too. Like visually, if you balance that out, I feel like this is begging for more space in between because the header is aligning awkwardly. But I was just going back to the renderings to get a sense of where this is on the building and how visible it would be from the street, and I'm not sure that it would be. So I would ask Mr. Gore to elaborate on that.
Another thing I'll explore, and this will take some input from our sales team, would be to basically just put a single window instead of I don't know if you can read it or not, but it says 4042 picture there, the bigger window that's up higher on either side of the fireplace. Maybe we ought to look at putting. I'm not describing this, but
these,
yeah, the big
these.
square ones, right?
Right.
Maybe we ought to look at just putting a normal 3060 window there at the same head height as the double that's next to it. Now, that kind of cuts out some of our market. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's something we could look at for sure.
Let me go back to your shutters in that same view.
Mm-hmm.
So on both the right and left sides of that, I guess that brick facade goes up, it's one continuous wall. Is there not enough room to actually put a shutter? If you bring it to the interior, you know, the way a shutter would normally work, it's gonna come inside.
Yeah, the shutter hangs just inside the
Yeah,
masonry
it
opening.
looks like there'd be enough room, but, you know, I don't know how much that is.
When we put them on the CAD drawing, it overhung the corner just a little bit. Now, if, let me look at the second floor. There,
If it
I guess it got to look to me, look, even if it was just inset by an inch, it looks pretty crowded over there. To try to have that shutter, right up against the corner of the building.
Okay, well, now that I'm looking at this, is it possible for the windows on that side just to align with the bottom windows? And then
oh,
that
well,
fixes that?
I'll tell you, as I'm looking at this,
Uh-huh.
I've since deleted one of those windows. So I have closed shutters on both of those windows below, and
Below.
they can align with the ones above. Yes.
But
Yes.
that, to me, would help, because then if there's one that's sort of wonky, it's not gonna take your eye, you
They-
can only look so many places.
They can be wonky together.
Yeah, I mean, because when you start looking, the ones, you could make the same argument, Amanda, on those.
Right. Yes, definitely.
So if they were lined up,
Mhm.
and especially if they were lined up so you could have the shutter on either side of the window,
Okay.
like Brian was saying.
Got it.
Then I think that offers some forgiveness for the other one.
Anything else? Susan?
I'd like to talk about the front elevation. So, I don't really think the bay window is really giving a nod to the Italianate era. It's the panel front.
Italian Renaissance. Slightly
Italian
different.
Renaissance, right. Of course, that influenced the Italianate, but at any rate, I don't think it's working. Is there something else that you could do to modify that?
Well, I think it could be just a pair of windows there. But frankly, that feels a little boring. But maybe the shape of the bay window. Let me think. Italian Renaissance. Well, I mean, I actually don't know that the bay is inappropriate for the Italian Renaissance. But
What about
do you think,
the
is there
way-
a shape of it? Does the shape of the bay in any way, changing the shape of the bay, help you feel any better about it?
Well, I think I guess it's having the paneling, it just doesn't
That,
seem to.
yeah, the
it's-
detailing of it
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
looks 1930. It feels 1930s.
Well, I think you might see I'm not sure how y'all feel about this, but a cantilevered bay that's just the size of those windows might be a little bit more stylistically appropriate.
Yeah, I think so, and also can the windows be bigger?
A little bit, maybe a little bit.
Because they're not really, because I feel like that, it's like the first thing I see when I look at the drawing, so that sort of tells me that there's something that needs to be tweaked. But I think that the windows above it, because they're larger, also, also is problematic. But I think a cantilever bay would actually be really nice.
Can we see the streetscape view?
Sure. And I'll just caution that, Chad isn't able to give the full effect in these renderings as much as the detailing as you would have on the 2D. But
Yeah.
Miss Besser, I agree with your point. I can't say I'm an expert on Italian Renaissance, but if I'm thinking of an Italianate, you're going to have large windows, but you're going to have a major focal point somewhere down, whether it's a big porch or rounded windows, rounded elements. Doing something here that might be, I don't think it's bad that your eye is drawn here, but I think it's not really necessarily as in keeping as it could be. And I think that Mr. Gore's suggestion of a cantilevered is pretty incredible. I think that'd look really great if it were done in masonry.
Oh, I didn't think of that, but I do like that.
Would you still keep the shed roof?
Well, I think it could be a hip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would match what's down here. That'd be great.
I have a question
Teamwork.
about the height of the garage, because I know that we're wanting, if you look at the front elevation, I know we're wanting those to appear It just seems a little tall to me based on what we've been looking at.
So here is more of a vantage that you see from the street view. And I'm going to go back to the elevations.
Well, it does happen to be exactly the same as the rest of the garages have
Okay.
been.
Just
Is this
reads
drawn
taller than
correctly?
the-
Maybe, yeah.
Is this drawn correctly? It doesn't feel that way in the rendering.
Right.
How do you mean? Well, this drawing is likely more accurate than the rendering, but how do you mean it does, what are we talking about
It looks
specifically?
shorter in the rendering.
Well, that might just be perspective.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that roof slopes back away from the view, so,
What's the slope on that roof?
10, 12, I think?
Oh, so it's pretty steep.
Yeah.
In the drawing, it looks like it's coming above the eave line
It
of the
does,
house,
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, it'd be nice if it were.
Dropped, yeah.
Well, again,
That's-
we worked through a bunch of these, and I'm not saying we shouldn't go try to make them better, but it needs to be a little bit over the top, the
Okay.
top of the eave in order to make it usable space up there.
Yeah.
So we've certainly tried to minimize its attachment to the house, but this has been what's been approved on the rest of them.
I do believe that I mean, I would definitely support it being lower, don't get me wrong, but if it were, because it's a cross gable, your eye is not drawn to it the same way it would be if it were a forward-facing gable. So, to Mr. Gord's point, it recesses back, and it's a steep pitch, and it recesses back, so your eye's not really going to the tip top of here as you perceive it.
And maybe the way to get comfortable with that is to look at what's built there now, because this is pretty. They're not. Some
Well,
of them
and
do
it's-
have a forward-facing
If you
gable.
look
But,
at how far back it is,
Mhm.
that's,
yeah.
Yeah, I think it would, to that point, Ms. Pierce, if this were one of them where it was proposed to be closer to the street and it was higher, you would perceive that much more strongly. The last point I need to make, of course, is that the lot coverage is exceeding that recommended by the guidelines by almost 5%.
Anything else, Amanda, from
No,
your end?
thank you.
Anything else from the commission? All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is new construction accessory and alterations rear porch construction at 109 Lewisburg. Steve Fahey.
Hi, Steve. It's good to see you.
Very good to see you.
Afternoon.
Good
Welcome.
afternoon. Hey, thank you. So we bought the house almost 2 years ago, and as you can see, the back of the house is a blank wall. And I have some additional photos if need be, but this is taken from the rear yard. So what we
can you show
Steve,
us
I can show the
Take
front.
this there. So we're on Berry Circle
Right.
and Lewisburg, that intersection. So we're actually next door neighbors to the Franklin Grove property.
Yes,
So,
thus some reasoning here.
yes, yes. So on some level, if you're at Franklin Grove, we're trying to give you something a little nicer to look at. So from Lewisburg, the house, we're fortunate, it is elevated. So everything that we're asking to do is in the back. So it almost would be completely invisible from Lewisburg. So if you do progress up Berry Circle, then you can see, and that's my car right there. So you can see the back patio the backyard. So we have a pea gravel pad and a back door that is literally covered by the gutter. So I have the overhang of the gutter, and that is it. So the space that you see where the Amanda's pointer is, that was a garage at one point. And I'm not sure when that was enclosed, but when we bought the house, it was already enclosed. So the shed that you see to the left of the screen, that was pre-existing. And beyond that shed is our neighbor's fence. So there's a wood fence there. So, and that stone column is essentially the lot, the edge of the lot. And that boxwood was almost destroyed by a tree that fell on it, so that's another project. But what we would be looking to do is remove that shed and create a simple drive and put a two-car carport. And then at the end of the carport, where you would nose in, we would put a space for storage. So the shed's roughly 8 by 10, and we'd be looking for 8 foot deep storage area at the back of the carport that would run the width of the carport, simple two-car. Then as you look back at the house, then we would add a covering to the rear door. So we would build out essentially a pad, roughly 14 feet by 8 feet, a little over 8 feet, and we would rework the gable to create a cover. So the existing gable that's there would be widened, and then we would have another extension that would come out to cover the actual porch itself. So the intent would be to match the existing house in terms of the turn back of the eaves and the line in terms of all proportion and everything to match everything that we have that's existing. Then so there you can see the rear patio. So those two windows would actually be covered by the porch, and the door into the back of the house would be to the right there. So we're not moving the door or anything like that. We're not changing the foundation of the house in any way. Then the house is brick. The house was painted prior to us buying it. So what we would ask, which we actually like, but what we would ask as well is to paint the brick that we would put in the little storage area in the back so it would match the house. So there you can see we do the one window that is there. Probably the only part of the house, or the only part of the carport that you would be able to see from Lewisburg is if you stood between our house and the Tanners who live next door to us at 111 and look straight through, kind of beyond or through our screen porch. You would probably get a glimpse of that shutter, that window, but that's about all that you would see from most vantage points.
So that's the gable where the cursor is?
This is the proposed garage.
Yeah, so if you were standing at our house, looking out into the backyard, then that view where the cursor is where that'd be the elevation you would see. And one characteristic of our lot, it is on a hill, so the hill continues to move up another 2.5 feet roughly from the house, and then it levels out. So there's actually almost a pad that's there just naturally. So we would set the carport on that pad, so then the cars would just pull straight in off of Berry Circle.
So it's an open carport, not a garage.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if I said
So-
garage, forgive me.
So the left elevation is what you're saying you might see from the street?
That front elevation where you see the window,
Which one?
right where the cursor
Right.
is,
You
Yeah.
would see
If-
this from Berry Circle, Mary.
That's what I thought, from
Well-
Berry
Yes,
Circle.
from Berry Circle.
And then-
This is left, which I know might be a little confusing, but it's looking at, from this angle, looking through.
right. As you pull into the carport, as you drive in, you would see that door.
So if
And
you're
that
standing-
door would be into the storage room.
Right. So you have all the bays, and you're looking back at this wall over here. But that's facing the interior of the lot. That's facing the neighbor behind. So let me show you again. So the carport's proposed to be here, the storage would be over here, the base would be here, and you're looking through, that elevation's what you see on the side of the storage.
Well, how does the roof transition? Because
Which roof are you talking? The carport?
for the storage,
It's just a solid, there's no change to the roof. It's just a single gable front to
my
back.
brain can't do this.
It's a side gable. So, Mr. Chair,
Okay,
can,
I've got it. It's
Okay.
just at one end.
yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
putting
yeah,
it
yeah.
across the back.
Yeah, so
Okay.
if you pull into the carport too far, you'll drive through the brick wall
I
into the
got
storage
it.
area.
Okay. Jim, are you ready for my comments?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I want to welcome the Fahey's here. This is their first time through this process, and we have met with Mr. Fahey and Mrs. Fahey a few times now And I know Kelly Gibson, I think, met with you too, so.
She did.
You know, they've been planning this for a while, so we're excited to help them through that. As background, when this property was for sale, I was asked to go to the property and provide some guidance to the listing agent as to how he could provide input on the question that he was getting asked a lot is, could there be a garage at this property? If I purchase this property, I'd like some sort of place for my car. And my recommendation at that time, based on, you know, the considerations of this is a unique lot shape, it has some unique visibility issues, I had recommended a carport. And so I do feel strongly that a carport's a great option at this particular property because it does allow for the number of cars that they'd like to provide some shelter for, but it also lessens the massing that you would experience at the property. There are a lot of setback considerations. It's part of the reason the Fahey's have met with us several times, and everything that you see here could be supported by zoning, as I've been told. So moving to the rear, I just want to make sure everyone's clear. I'm going to try to toggle so you can see. This is the existing rear gable where a single bay garage was. So Mr. Fahey had explained they've got to alter the shape of the gable to try to create a porch element here. The door that exits is on the side of this gable form. This comes out a few feet from the masonry wall, so there's a door there, a man door that comes out and goes into the backyard. So they're trying to provide a cover for that. It's just, I'm not able to show it to you.
And I do have some photos of it that I can send you, Amanda, as needed.
If we need to, because I'd have to get into my email and pull those out. But I wanted to explain that door's there, and so altering the shape of the gable would enable the applicant to create a space for kind of a landing, and put a smaller gable underneath that specifically for the porch. This is an alteration that would have very limited visibility from the main road on which it's situated, which is Lewisburg Avenue. Because of it being a corner lot, it does have some visibility from the side street, but I do think that the alteration is placed respectfully, and it's certainly building off an alteration that was already done to the house from its historic, configuration, which I'm not really sure what that was, but I know that it certainly was not this gable here, the way that it's shown here.
And Amanda, the photographs you supplied us, it does show this door.
Yes, it does. I was trying to show it from the street view here, but if I go to these photographs, you see that door. Does that help everyone?
Yeah.
So while the guidelines do ask that, original roof lines be preserved and maintained, that's when there's high visibility. Arguably, there is some visibility due to the nature of being at an intersection, but I do think that it's thoughtful. Another option would be that they have more of a flat roof here that has a little bit of slope, of course, to allow for water to flow, but just have it over these two windows to create a landing space. That would keep it from altering the existing roof line, and it may be something that allows for a less invasive or expensive project. What they are also looking to do is just to provide some kind of landing space, since it is a detached structure, so they can stand somewhere to open their door without getting rained on, which I think we all can appreciate. And moving on to the garage, or outbuilding, excuse me. The applicant has done, taken staff's comments. I do think this is a fairly simple form. I do think that it lessens massing by being open on the sides. I would recommend that the commission consider allowing for that. It does make sense to allow for painted brick here, given the context of the property, but I will leave that to the committee members to comment on. It's very simple and minimal, and it's definitely in keeping with being simplistic in relation to the home that it's serving. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners' comments?
I have a comment. What is the relationship of the carport ridge height to your original home?
So the slope of the roof is the exact same. So I think the carport right now is showing a 9-foot height before you start the roof. So it's definitely lower than the roof of the home. I couldn't tell you exactly how much. It's a good 5 to 7 feet lower than the house itself.
Thank you.
That does prompt a question from staff. So if you were to measure from grade to this eave here, do you know about how tall that is?
I believe that's, well, the interior rooms are an 8-foot ceiling.
Okay, and are you proposing 9 feet clearance for the garage?
That's correct.
Okay, but the slope of the property is lower at that point, or is it higher?
The placement of the carport would be higher elevation than the house by about 2.5 feet.
But you do need a 9-foot clearance. Well, I guess what my question is really trying to minimize the height. Is there a possibility? I see that the siding comes down lower than the returns. Is that necessary? Maybe some of the architectural.
It just aesthetically to match the house.
Okay.
The slope.
Oh, is that a feature on the house?
Yes.
Or the same slope?
I just think we want it to read somewhat lower than the house.
From where?
In terms of height off of the ground or?
From where, Mary? Lewisburg? You're not going to see it from Lewisburg.
No, you're not, well, you are gonna see the end from Lewisburg,
Maybe.
maybe. But I think as you turn onto Berry Circle, unless it sits far enough back, just something that lets it read. I don't know if I would love to see it, I'll just say, out of siding like a cementia board. It holds paint so well now. We've got some houses that have the little, they've added a garage element or a carport, and they're out of the lap siding, so cementia board, because it would hold the paint. And I don't know if you put a metal roof, if you could get a little more lower slope on that. But overall, I think it's a needed project for you. I
And-
get it. I get why you.
I will
do it.
throw kind of an anecdotal comment to you that that siding product that you referenced is made by the #1 competitor of my company.
Oh dear.
So if possible, I'd rather not use that.
Oh dear.
I might be fired.
Do you have the competitive product you could use that you represent?
No, ma'am, the city of Franklin zoning does not allow my product to be used, believe it or not. It's a composite wood product. So that's another project as well.
Any other comments? Susan?
Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
It's hard to hear.
I think that the way that you've laid it out seems to be the least unobtrusive, and, I mean, you're being sensitive to the site, so I don't really have any issues with it.
My main concern in looking at this more closely is just making sure that the height of the structure is lower than the height of the house. So what I would need from the applicant is to provide the height of the house and the overall height of the structure, so that I can make those comparisons. The slope is higher, but the zoning ordinance does not allow for interpretation where if a slope is lower, that an outbuilding can be taller by, on a two-dimensional drawing. So
Lisa, you got a comment?
Yes, I agree with that, and I just wanted to ask, is that new window that's going to be in the storage area, those are shutters, correct, on that?
Yes, ma'am, to match the front of the house.
Are there other shutters? Oh, in the front,
Oh, yes, ma'am. So
Okay.
from Lewisburg, you would see shutters on the windows.
Okay, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Anything else?
Okay, any comments on the porch?
I like it.
Well, my comment would be just, matching the house is not, I know it's counterintuitive, but it's really not in our guidelines that you match, you make it kind of evolve over time so it tells the story of your house, which I love that house.
And I'm happy to, when we engaged the architect, he came back with some examples, but his preference, he felt pretty strongly that this made sense, but we're open if you guys feel that that's not appropriate.
It seems to me that the form, the gable form on the ranch-style house is appropriate.
I agree.
Okay, anything else? I have no problems with it
Yep.
at all.
Really, the only thing that I need to confirm is the height in relationship to the house, so.
And just to make sure that the height is the height above the ground at that point?
Yes.
Or like height above sea level?
The height above, from the existing grade to the overall ridge,
Okay, excellent.
Height.
On both.
yeah.
On both.
Yeah, and how they relate to each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can assure you it's lower, I just can't. say
Oh,
exactly
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
strongly it is,
But
but
I'll
that
get
way I
that
can
precisely.
relate to my zoning colleagues.
what. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you.
All right, we're on our last item, discussion of proposed revisions to the Historic Zoning Commission bylaws.
Thank you all for your time. Kelly, Victoria, and I have worked to bring a overhauled bylaws document to you for your consideration at the October voting meeting. We wanted to afford this opportunity to get to provide you some information on the major changes and get any questions or comments as we move forward. So the first thing I'll like to notice is that our current bylaws document is not formatted in a more modern way. What you have on the screen here is much more modern. It's much more in keeping with other quasi-judicial bodies here in our city. It definitely has a more modern tone, a less negative and more positive tone. And the main changes, really, other than formatting, would be that it's inclusive of the Design Review Committee. So the Design Review Committee, as all of you have been a part of this commission for your respective amounts of time, it's been in place. It's a standing committee of the Historic Zoning Commission. I have been here for 13 years, and I think that was right at the very beginning of when DRC started. It's evolved over time. It's about time we put it in our bylaws. So it gives the end user, whether it is a commissioner, a staff member, an applicant, better understanding of what the Design Review Committee does. And forgive me, I pulled up the PDF, so I'm searching for where that section starts. Right here. So under committees, it has information about what the DRC is, what its role is, and it also provides information on the regular meetings and how we publish agendas and how you notify staff that you want to be on the DRC agenda. Unfortunately, that might be one of the more problematic things that we experience is getting notification and the amount of information needed to provide information to you in a timely manner and provide staff with enough information to create an agenda for publication. So that it's more specific on that. It's also specific on order of business. So as you can see, this follows the order that we followed today, which is calling to order, applicant presentation, then staff comments, and then the DRC committee comments. It does specify that public comment may be permitted at the discretion of the chair. As you all know, that is not typical for our meetings, and so that's here to allow the chair to choose at his or her discretion. Does anyone have any questions about the revisions?
I did have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, I noticed that, there's some things that have been omitted and some things that have been added. as far as when you compare the two together.
Yes.
And one thing, the old one lists qualifications for members. Has that been omitted, or did I miss that?
Which section are you in?
Let's see. All right, let's see, under the new one, it would be under section 5.1, members.
So the qualifications that were written previously are ones that were really sort of redundant from the Tennessee Code Annotated, if I recall. And forgive me, this has been sitting for us to bring forward to you throughout the pandemic. The last we did some major revisions was a year ago, so in a draft form to bring to you. But my recollection from that is that it's really more codified in the state code.
Okay, so basically,
That's
this,
right.
this would just refer back to the state, and it didn't have to be spelled out in our bylaws.
Right.
Okay.
So
I
the
wondered
way
about
that it reads as proposed is the manner of appointment in terms of office will be governed by TCA. So in my mind, that reads that, the mayor uses the TCA as the outline by which he or she decides how to make those appointments. But what we're generally looking for, and you can see in the training, continuing education requirements, is that in keeping with the requirements of the Certified Local Government Program, of which the City of Franklin is enrolled, we do require at least one member to have training a year. Now, we do better than that. We expect to do better than that. As you all know, I offer an in-house training in tandem with our law department every year. We did not have that last year because of the pandemic, but we do intend to move forward with that in February. We may have one new commissioner at that point, and we want to make sure that we capture everybody. So all that said, the training would allow for us to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the subject matter. But as far as the qualifications, it's really written in TCA. And Kelly had a comment.
Yes, we try not to be duplicative when we can, in case there are changes to TCA. Our bylaws aren't suddenly out of date. They just automatically refer to the TCA when the TCA really regulates it.
And that was probably the better way to put it. She's always good at that.
And they
Thank-
might have changed, honestly, already. I haven't read them recently.
They still read the same way for those types of considerations. And what TCA says is similar to what the current bylaws say, is that we're looking for professionals in the areas of historic preservation, architecture, people that have an interest in preservation as a general practice. We are highly encouraged where possible, and I would argue in the city of Franklin it's definitely possible to have an architect on the commission that would help provide that level of guidance to his or her fellow members. And we are required by TCA to have a member of our planning commission, which we do currently and we always have.
Let me ask a question about voting. This says that discretion of the chair, the voting should be a voice vote or by roll call. In watching BOMA and the Planning Commission, it seems like all of their votes are roll call. Is that, I don't care, but is it better, should we be consistent with them?
It's really up to this board's discretion because the way they do it is in accordance with their bylaws.
Okay.
So if you would prefer to do roll call
I'm-
vote, we
well, let me
can.
You've had
ask
us raise our
others.
hands, too.
Well, I know, I do. But I can go down name by name like we were doing with Zoom if we want to do that. But I'm just saying, they are doing, I see that with BOMA and with the Planning Commission. I don't know what their bylaws say, but is that what they say?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So it's really up to the chair, and if the committee
Well,
members have a preference, I'm sure the
Is
chair
there
would love
any
to hear that.
preference to change what we're doing now, I guess, from the other commission members?
I personally like the chair having the flexibility.
Okay.
I agree.
And I just want to remind everybody that we did have roll call when we were doing virtual
Yes.
meetings. That's a requirement at the state at that time. But this is speaking more to having a meeting in a room all together.
Okay.
It's a close vote.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
when
yeah,
you-
yeah.
that's when you
That's-
vary.
That's where, okay. All right. We'll keep on keeping on then.
And I think the
Right.
bylaws do say on minor on kind of minor things, you know, up and down, yay, nay.
Well,
So-
it says the voting on the questions shall be by voice, and the ayes and nays shall be entered into the meeting minutes, so.
And they are.
We know. All right, Susan.
I just wanted to comment, when I first joined the commission, this is in 2010, that the design review committee was 3 people.
Right.
And then because of my interest in architecture, I was just showing up for the meetings, and it gradually evolved to being the whole commission. And I think that's really a great thing.
It's
Yes,
good.
it's a great thing, and thank goodness for it,
Yeah.
because
Well-
we would be in here for days at a commission meeting if
Well-
it were not for design review.
I remember when Anthropology did their building, they said, and you know, they are in historic districts all across America, and they said that we had the best process because of the design review.
Wow.
I thought it was good.
That's a great
from
compliment.
That's
Anthropology.
awesome.
We do have a lot of compliments from citizens on the DRC process. At first, when staff provides information on it, I think there's some eye glazing over. They're like, "You mean there's 2 meetings?" I do say it's voluntary. This process is voluntary, but I do stress that the success rate is much higher because there's a level of comfortability on both sides of the table, and certainly there's some tempered expectations. Sometimes folks believe that things need to be very ornate or are far more involved than they necessarily need to be to meet our design guidelines. So more often than not, people are pleased. Their pocketbooks are pleased because this process does save some money, honestly, and it gives people a better sense of what the expectations are before they put a lot of time and effort, pen to paper. So I want to thank you all, take this opportunity to thank you all for what you do. I know, like Ms. Besser said, it's evolved over time. This is a big commitment for you all every month, but it's a huge service to your community, and I can attest to the fact that people do really appreciate it.
Amanda, what's the next step with these? Do we vote on it at our formal meeting, or,
Yes.
okay?
So bylaws are required to be maintained and voted on by the commission. So it would just be this commission. It doesn't have to go any
Okay.
further than that.
That's-
But if you do have any questions about the changes in content, I can say there are some tweaks here and there, like Mr. Laster said, but overall the intent is to reduce anything that's duplicative with the code, the state code, and also to provide more specific guidance on how to apply for meetings, both DRC and the voting meeting, and just more about the DRC in general. I don't see this going anywhere. I think it's here to stay, and I think that everyone appreciates it.
Okay.
Kelly, Victoria, do you guys have anything?
Just like to thank you for your time, because I know this does take a lot of time from you all every month, and it's really important. It results in a better product in the end. So thank you for thinking about each project and giving thoughtful comment.
I mean, the teamwork that we had on the new build item tonight, I think the applicant was really happy with that.
I know.
So there you go. It is a better product, and everyone feels good about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. I think we're adjourned then, unless there's
This
something
is
else.
amazing.